And over to you, Rabbi Steinberg. There we go.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning. First of all, as I start, I'd like to thank you all for welcoming me to your minyan, allowing me to speak. I have to be honest, originally, when I started davening here, I davened here as a matter of convenience. I live just down the road, and therefore I could hardly not come here for the odd tefillah. But having said that, after a few years of davening here off and on, I really feel welcomed. It's very nice. It's a very special tefillah. It always starts on time, finishes on time, well run by a kappa over here. And so it's obviously an honor and a pleasure to be here to speak today. You know, I tell my children, as I had for my father, wherever you go, wherever you daven, not only in tefillah, not only in prayer, and anything you do, there's always something to learn from the different people that you join and you're part of. And I want to explain myself. The Gemara in Brachos tells us the importance of coming to davening, to prayer, to Shachris, Mincha, Mariv, on time. And in fact, the Gemara tells us that those who come on time get extra reward. And in fact, even more so, the Gemara tells us the first 10 people get the reward according to how many people daven there. That means if there's 100 people for Shachris, and you're one of the first 10, then your Shachris, the reward will be equivalent of 100. So it's a good investment. Come on time, and you get, the bigger the minyan, the better. Turn around, come early, then turn around by Yishtabach, see how many you are, count them up, and say, well, that's my Shachris. And the Gemara explains why. And the Gemara says, because the first 10, the quorum, the minyan, brings the presence of the Shekhinah, brings the presence of God to the shul, and therefore they deserve that reward because they have brought that Shekhinah, they brought the presence, and therefore that's why they get that reward. Now, I have noticed here in United, to become one of the first 10, you have to come at least 12 minutes early. By 5 to 8, you have well over a minyan sitting with the talis and tefillin on, ready for prayer. And that, for me, is a tremendous lesson of respect for tefillah, respect for the shul, respect for what we're about to do. Rushing in on the last minute doesn't have the same decorum, the same feelings towards the prayer. And this is something which shines in this place. Sunday morning, it's slightly easier to be one of the first 10. You take a look, I'll tell you. The average day of the week is 12 minutes, and Sunday morning it's 7 minutes. You could still be one of the first 10. But I shouldn't be giving away these secrets because now I'm going to have stiffer competition. But that is a Gemara, and that's a very important thing which I've learned, I've picked up being here, davening here. So I thank you once again for this honor. Now, that was just an introduction. Truth is, I've had about 3 months to prepare for this because I got the text from Rabbi Jacobs about 3 months ago, so I've got a lot to say. I'd like to point out another point, which as part of the introduction, and that is the Tehillim that we say over here after the davening on behalf of Israel for the past couple of years on behalf of the hostages. And I made a calculation from October 7th for the 2 years, every Shachris and Mincha, you said 3 parts of Tehillim, Shachris, 3 parts of Tehillim, Mincha. Now, there's 2 Shachrises, so that's actually 9 Tehillim a day, and you said it for 2 solid years. Now, if you times that by the odd minyan, which is about 30, 40 people, you're talking about over 2 years, more than 200,000 pieces of Tehillim being said for those hostages. More than 200,000. It's hard to calculate. You have bigger minyanim, smaller minyanim, 2 shachrises or sham. So you have 1 shachris, or you have many shachrises. So it's difficult to calculate. Over 200,000 pieces of Tehillim was said over here for the hostages. And I find that also a tremendous inspiration. Many shuls lost steam after 6 months, a year. can't be blamed. It's a difficult thing to keep on davening. But here, faithfully, you carried on day after day, morning and evening. It's remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. Every tefillah, 3 kapitla, 3 pieces, and it's unbelievable. And look what we were there. Look what we were merited to see the hostages come out. And no doubt that this little corner of the world, Edra, has contributed greatly to the success of releasing those hostages. Okay, coming to today's subject. Today is Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer, for some of us, it's just about not saying Tachanun. For some of us, it's about having a shave. Depends on your minhag, depends on your custom. For some, it's a full-blown Yom Tov. If you go to Jerusalem, you see the Hasidim and in other places as well. They walk around with the big Steinberg, Bekitchas. I don't know how you say Steinberg in English. Steinberg, big fur hats. And it's like a full-blown Yom Tov. It's difficult to understand what this Yom Tov is all about. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai died, passed away on this day, and we sort of celebrate his life in his passing, which we have such a joy. Difficult to understand the joy. Going further, besides what's difficult to understand the joy, it's a very lot of Kabbalah in it. It's a Kabbalistic slant to it. And I have to confess, sitting here talking about it, my knowledge of Kabbalah is very, very minimum. Very minimum. But I'd like to give some understanding, some perception of what the day is about, what this is all about. And it's not only a message for Lag BaOmer, it's a message for all our lives, continuously throughout the year, drawing a message from the life of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, one of the great sages of the Mishnah times, one of the greatest of the sages, and drawing a message from his life to what can help us for the rest of the year. And maybe with that understanding, the great simcha, the joy of Lag BaOmer. Therefore, it's not about saying Tachanun, although that's a tremendous joy. Shame it's not Monday or Thursday, but it's a tremendous joy. But something more inspirational than that. The Gemara tells us in Brochus a fascinating story, a very long story. It's a whole page of a story. I'm not going to tell you all the details, but the Gemara says like this. The Gemara discusses, is Mariv, the prayer of Mariv that we say in the evening, a reshus, a voluntary thing, or is it a chayva? Are we obligated to pray the tefillah of Mariv? As an aside, before we get to the story, it's a machlokas, it's an argument in the Mishnah. It's an argument all the way down. And we actually paskan that Mariv is a reshus, and it's voluntary. Now, before we all say, okay, we're not coming to Mariv tonight, we do need a minyan. And although halachically it's a reshus, but the Shulchan Aruch tells us that the Jews over the years brought it upon themselves as an obligation. That means technically it's a reshus, it's a voluntary thing, but the Jews took it upon themselves as they're obligated to do it, and that's why today we're accustomed to look at it as an obligation, because it really has become an obligation because we accepted it upon ourselves as an obligation. But that's the question and the subject that the Gemara over there deals with. Is it a reshus, a voluntary thing, or is it a chayva, an obligation? And the Gemara tells us a story that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai went to Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua was one of the great sages of the day, we'll see in a moment. And he asked Rabbi Yeshua, what's your opinion about Mariv? Is it a reshus, is it voluntary, or is it chayva, or is it obligation? So Rabbi Yeshua says the following, he says, I hold it's a reshus. It's a voluntary thing. Okay, so Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, seemingly trying to stir up some trouble, it looks like, but obviously we were talking about very, very great people, so it's difficult to understand what he was trying to do. We'll explain maybe later. He went to Rabbi Gamliel. Now, Rabbi Gamliel was the Nossi, he was the leader of the generation. And he says to Rabbi Gamliel, what's your opinion about Mariv? Is it a reshus, a voluntary thing, or is it a chayva, or is it obligation? So Rabbi Gamliel says, I hold it's a chayva, it's an obligation. So Shimon ben Yochai says, oh, very nice. But you should know Rabbi Yeshua holds it's a reshus. He holds it's a voluntary thing. So Rabbi Gamliel says to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, oh, is that so? Is that true? Is that really so? We'll see. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to come to the Beis Medrash, I'll come to the yeshiva, and we'll challenge him on it. The next morning, the yeshiva fills up with all the Gemara tells us, all the great sages of the generation. Bale Tracin, the Gemara tells us the warriors of the generation. And Gamliel stands up and says, you should know Mariv is a chayva, it's obligation. And no one says a word. No one argues. Rabbi Shua sitting there, doesn't open his mouth. So Gamliel turns around to the public and he says, is there anyone over here who argues with me? And Rabbi Shua still doesn't say a word. So Gamliel turns to Rabbi Shua and says, what's your opinion? Do you hold it's a chayva or a shus? So Rabbi Shua says, look, if I could, I would deny it, and I would say that I agree with you. But you've asked me, I can't deny it. I have to say, really, I hold it's a rishus. Not like you say it's a chayva. I hold it's a rishus. It's a voluntary thing. One's not obligated to daven marriage. That's what I hold. So Gamliel tells Rabbi Shua, stand on your legs, stand up, and he makes him stand. And then Gamliel goes on to talk about other subjects. He gives a share, whatever the share is about, and Rabbi Shua standing. And there's murmuring going on in the Beis Medrash. They're not happy. Why? It's disrespectful. Although Gamliel is the Nasi, and he's the greatest of the generation, Rabbi Shua is also very great. And one cannot just act disrespectful to him. And he's standing there, you're leaving him standing, you're not finished wrapping this up. And the yeshiva start murmuring, and they go to another Tana called Rabbi Chutzpis. Famously known as one of the 10 martyrs who were killed by the Roman king. Chutzpah. No, I don't know why he was called Chutzpis. And they say to him, this is not on. We have to demote Rabbi Gamliel. He cannot carry on being the leader of our generation. He can't be a leader. Look how he's behaving. And they say further, if you go in Rosh Hashanah, there was another debate between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Shua. And again, Rabbi Gamliel forced Rabbi Shua to listen to him. So we see Rabbi Gamliel doesn't have respect for Rabbi Shua, and although he's the Nasi, he can't go on like this. So they demote him. Done. He's not Nasi anymore. Okay, that's done. That's step one. But now we need to find a new Nasi. So they look around. They think maybe Rabbi Shua. The problem is Rabbi Shua, he's the reason why they demoted him. It would be painful for Rabbi Gamliel that they demoted Rabbi Gamliel and the challenger Rabbi Shua should take over. It's too painful. They think about Rabbi Kiva. Weren't happy with Rabbi Kiva. So they choose Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. That's the famous Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah on Seder night. We speak about Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. They went to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's house and they asked Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, would you be the Nasi? And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, first of all, he says, I have to ask my wife, which is a very important thing. You get a good job offer, ask your wife. Right? Even if they offer you to be Prime Minister of England, I think even more so, ask your wife. So he says he asks his wife, and in fact, actually, they explain why did he say he has to ask his wife. Powerful thing. Why did he tell him to ask his wife? It's a good job. Grab it. He said like this. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was worried that in the same way as Rabbi Gamliel somewhat had hurt Rabbi Shua's feeling as a leader, has hurt Rabbi Shua, whatever that means. Obviously, we understand we're talking about Gamliel was a great Tana. But whatever it means, that he somewhat hurt Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was worried that when he becomes leader, he'll also do the same mistake. I also have that fault in him that he might be too harsh on those around him. As a leader, a person becomes proud and becomes haughty and then might do the same thing. There's only one person who really knows your midas and your nature and how you behave, and that's your wife. So he said, I have to ask my wife, how am I when I'm a leader? How am I behaving with those around me? That's why he went to ask his wife. So he asks his wife. So the first thing his wife says is, don't take the job. You know what's going to happen. In a few days, they're going to demote you. They're going to happy with Gamliel. They'll feel bad for Gamliel. And you'll have the job a few days. What's the point having a job a few days? It's not worth it. And the Blossom last guy said, no, it's worthwhile. A person gives you a nice jar, a nice vessel, even for a few days. Use it, and it breaks. So I'll get the job for a few days, and if it breaks, it breaks. I'll tell you, ask Liz Truss, how was it to be Prime Minister for 49 days, 45 days? I'm sure she was quite happy in the end. So a nice pension, probably. So he said, he'll take it. So he said, I'm too young, right? I'm only 18. So that's famously we say on Seder night, that there was a miracle that happened. His beard turned white, and he became the leader of the generation. Not at the age of 18. And then the Gemara goes on with a very long story, how eventually Gamliel realized he made a mistake, and he goes and apologizes to Rabbi Shua. Let's apologize for the greatness of those days. He wasn't too proud or too haughty and the Nossi. He said, okay, I did something wrong. I apologize. Now he's apologized. So now he has to become Nossi again. He has to become leader again. But we have the Blazer ben Azariah. So the Gemara tells us they took alternate weeks. 1 week was a Gamliel, 1 week was a Blazer ben Azariah. They had weeks, 1 week each. And the Gemara finishes off. Who was this person who triggered this argument about our Marav being a Shus, Marav being a Chiv? It seemed such a major subject that it managed to pull down the great Nossi, the great leader of the generation. Shimon ben Yochai, he was the one who instigated and caused all this to happen. Now, why was it so important for Shimon ben Yochai to decide whether Marav was Rishus and a voluntary thing or favor obligation, that he had to get Gamliel and Bishua to attack each other and Gamliel should come out as the Nossi saying it's a favor? What was so important? And I think the answer is like this. We say on Friday night, Lahagid ba'boiker chastecho ve'emunoscho ba'leilos. To say the kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of God, in the morning, and his faith by night. And they explain, day doesn't just mean day. Day means when things are clear, there's clarity in the world. We understand what's going on. Then it's easy to say the chesed, we see the kindness of God all around us. But then there's nights. There are times where it's all dark, and we feel disconnect, and we don't understand what's going on around us. And then it's emunah, emunoscha ba'leilos, then it's faith. Then it's a much harder challenge to really recognize God. What we have to do is find faith, find inner faith. And Shimon ben Yochai was saying, by night, during the day, Shachris and Mincha, it's easier to daven. It's day. We see clarity. We have connection. By night, it's much harder. It's dark. We feel disconnected. We don't feel the presence of God. The Emunascha ba'leilos, Shimon ben Yochai wanted to make sure that people should daven Marav at night. And he said, therefore, I want Gamliel who says it's a chayva, he held it was obligated. And he wanted Gamliel to force that in the yeshiva, force this idea that there's emunah by night. There's davening, there's faith by night when things are dark. And that's what Shimon ben Yochai was doing on his deathbed as he was dying on Lag BaOmer. They tell us in Zohar, as I said, I don't know much about Zohar, but the tradition is that he gave a huge part of Kabbalah, of Zohar, on his deathbed. Zohar means the light of faith as he's dying, as he's passing away, and his Talmidim, his students feel what we don't have, our Rebbe is going, our master is going. It's going to get dark. And he said, no, you'll find light. You'll find inside you, dig deeper. And we know Kabbalah is called Penimis Shel Torah. It's called the depths, the inside of Torah. And that is the message of Lag BaOmer. Inside all of us, there's faith. And even when it goes dark and we don't really understand what's going on, and it's difficult, and we don't feel that connection, we don't feel the presence of God, there's emunascha ba'leilos, there's marif, there's a tefillah, there's a connection. We just need to dig deep down to find it. And if we carry on in that perek of which we say on Friday night, Lahagid ba'boiker chastecha ve'emunoscha ba'leilos, we go on to talk about music, ale oso, the ale novel, different instruments of music. Music, song, is another way of digging deep. Digging inside oneself. One feels sad and down and disconnected and doesn't feel that energy, that feeling of life. With song, he can reawaken it by himself. With song, he can bring it out. Because that's the real pnimis, that's the depth. I want to tell you another Hasidic story. Am I allowed to say Hasidic stories in the shul over here? Hasidic story. Okay, so I want to tell you a Hasidic story. My father used to tell us a story, and there's a lot of depth to the story, I think. There was once a master and a student, and they used to learn all the time together. Learned. And every so often, when they were tired or it wasn't going so well, they would break out in song. They would sing some songs. Beautiful, very nice. That's how they would reignite themselves in the fervor of Torah and serving Hashem. Then what happens is the master tells the student, I want to lift this a level. Till now we've been singing songs with words. Now I want to sing the song without words. It's lifting a level. There's a song without confining the song and the depth of the meaning of the song just to certain words. The expanse and the depth and the meaning is so big that words don't narrow it down and confine it and make it small. It's bigger than that. So he teaches his student, and he starts singing songs of, without words, just deep meaning, deep feeling, deep connection to God.
A nigger.
Oh, exactly. Then his master gets elderly, and he's on his deathbed, and he's dying. And the student says to his master, he leans over to him and says, "What are you singing now? What's going on now?" And he says, "You know what I'm singing now? I'm singing a song without any words and without any tune, because even a tune narrows it down. My heart inside me is expanding in niggun, in song, without even having notes, because even notes subject it to certain, this is song, this is connection to God without being subjected to words and notes, just complete connection to God." That's what he did on his deathbed. And that's what the message is over here. Pnimis shel Torah, the depth of Torah, the depth of mitzvahs, the depth when it goes, we don't know what's going on. He's on his deathbed with Shimon ben Yochai. Shimon ben Yochai was passed away today. It seems so sad. But there's so much joy because he left over to us a tradition of tremendous feeling of depth and light. Zohar means to shine, the shine of the inside of Torah, the depth of Torah. I want to finish off with one more message. One more thing which carries on in that perek of Tehillim that we say on Friday nights. We started with the Hagid Baboker Chastecha, the Emunoscha Baleilos, the Emunah of night. And we carried on with song, because song arouses deep connection to God. There's one more pasuk at the end. Oid Yunuvun Beseva, the Sheinim Ra'ananim Yiu, the Hagid Kiyosha Hashem Tsuri V'Le'av Losaboik. Right? So you sing it with the whole niggin, with the yekasha, the yekas. I'm davening here often Friday night. There's that Sadik Katama Yifroch with the whole niggin. There's a way of singing it. Okay. So Oidunuvan Besev, what does it mean? That you get elderly. The Sheinim V'Ananim Yiu, but Hashem, God, makes us fresh and still able, what? Lahagid, to tell the world, Ki Yosha Hashem, that God is upright. He's correct. Everything that God does, whether we understand it or we don't understand it, is correct. So he's our rock. Veloy avlosa boy. There's nothing Hashem doesn't make any mistakes. It's only the older generation that really can tell the younger generation that message. Because young people look around and say they're ambitious and they're asking questions and they don't have the experience of life. They don't have the experience of hindsight. They don't have the experience of anything going on around. As a person gets elderly and he looks over his life and he looks around the world and he sees everything that goes on, he has the power. He has the strength to say, Lehagid ki Yosha Hashem. God is upright. God is correct. Suri v'lo avlosa boy. He has that strength because he sees things with a bigger picture, with a bigger understanding than the young who don't have that breadth of knowledge and understanding and experience. The Gemara in Kiddushin tells us a fascinating thing. The Gemara says that we know there's a mitzvah, there's a commandment when an elderly person walks into the room. That's famous, it's a pasuk. A person has to stand up. Stand up for people or elderly people, show them respect. And the Gemara tells us not only you have to stand up for a Jewish elderly person, but even a non-Jew, you have to stand up. An elderly non-Jew walks into the room, you have to give him respect. And the Gemara says, why? Why? I mean, obviously we have to have respect for everyone, but standing up is an extra measure of respect, which you would have thought that would apply maybe to a Jew, but to a non-Jew, be nice, be cordial, but giving that extra respect of standing up. So the Gemara says like this, because even a non-Jew, his perspective to life is different than the young. Because even a non-Jew, having lived a truly fruitful life, will see and understand this world with a better perception than the young. Although maybe he doesn't have the faith that we have and the Torah that we have and the messages that we have, but he has the life experience and he feels all that, he knows all that. This is the pnimis, this is the emunah, this is what we have from this Perek of Tehillim, and this is what we have from the message of Lag BaOmer. I hope, besides just not saying Tachnun, we come out of this day feeling that we don't really learn his Torah so much, but the message is there, that there's depth, there's light inside us, even when it's dark outside. Even when it's dark, one still should daven Marim and connect to God. And as I said, thank you very much for having me and for listening. And
Thank you so much. That was very enlightening. Thank you so much. I will say goodbye to those on Zoom, and then we'll finish the proceedings here.